There are intermodal railroad designs that you can effectively model on your layout. Stay tuned. Bob Johnson here with PK&W Railroad, coming at you with another video. This time it's about intermodal yard design as I plan my first modules. Those of you who follow my channel are not going to be surprised by the fact that I'm deciding to model intermodal yards as my initial modules, because I've been modeling containers, well cars, all kinds of intermodal equipment for years. So it's time to have a better place to display those and to play with them. So here is the photograph that really motivated me to start planning the modules. I was looking at photographs of these rubber-tired gantry cranes, which I plan on modeling one or two of those for the module. And I saw this track plan, the layout of the track here, and it was just 2 tracks. Even I can model 2 tracks. And I thought this was really simple. You know, 1 turnout, 2 parallel tracks, some room for a truck to get underneath the crane. Pretty simple stuff. It's adjacent to a major yard, but nonetheless, I thought this was going to be relatively easy to do. As you know, most ocean ports with container traffic are absolutely huge. Here's a picture of a pretty modest facility in Houston, which is I believe it's the Port of Houston. I believe it's the Bayport or Bayfront Container Terminal. As oceanside terminals go, this one is really small. So if you're interested in modeling an oceanside port, you might want to take a look at that. But you'll notice that it's got 9 cranes. Who wants to model 9 cranes? Not me. So, it's 3,500 feet long minimum. It's probably 2,500 feet deep. Some stacks of containers and chassis. I mean, it's nothing like the Port of Los Angeles, for example, but it's still a pretty big place. So once I saw this track arrangement that I wanted to model, I thought, boy, I need to look at intermodal yards in the area of my planned layout, which is from Tampa around the arc of the Gulf of Mexico to Galveston, Texas, and then west. So I wanted to look at intermodal facilities in that area. So I found this website, which is called loadmatch.com. And you'll see this is the site index for loadmatch.com. If you see it there on the left-hand column, down about 2/3 of the way, there's a item called Intermodal Terminals, Ramps, and Depots. You want to click on that. That will take you to this page, which is basically a map of the United States showing all the cities with intermodal facilities in them in the United States. Pretty convenient resource. Now, if you click on one of those cities, and I clicked on Houston for purposes of this video, you'll see a list of all of the facilities in the Houston area. And what you want to focus on is in that upper list that says railroad terminals. These are inland container terminals. They're not going to be these massive oceanside terminals where you're going to have to find some way to show a ship. You're going to have to show a huge number of very large gantry cranes. It's going to be a real challenge. I mean, it's super cool facilities, don't get me wrong. But do you want to model 9 gantry cranes? I don't. So if you stick to that top list, the railroad terminals list, you will get inland terminals. And so you won't have to deal with the size or the ships and the massive ship-to-shore gantry crane construction problem. So the first yard that I looked at was the CSX Winter Haven yard. And this yard is absolutely massive. It's got 5 or 6 tracks in the intermodal part of the yard. It's 3,500 feet long at least. It's absolutely massive. It's really not a good candidate. However, if you look at the next yard, I then moved over to New Orleans, and I found this Canadian National Harahan, Louisiana yard, and this is a classic double-ended container yard with 2 tracks, just like the one I saw in my initial photograph. 2 tracks, and some sort of gantry cranes working it. But so what I found out was that these intermodal yards that are inland are almost all 2-track yards. So very modelable. But they're not all double-ended. Here's a picture of the UP Avondale yard, also in the New Orleans area. It's a stub yard. So that's cool. If a stub will fit better on your layout, that's totally prototypical. Totally prototypical. Now the next picture is again of a different kind of a yard design for intermodal. This is the CSX yard at 62nd Street in Tampa. And notice that while it's got 2 tracks, the tracks are on the outside of the yard, and the trailers and the containers are in the center of the yard, in between the tracks. So this yard does not use a gantry crane. It's got to use a piggy packer or one of those Kalmar container cranes vehicles that you can get from Walthers. So you don't even have to build a gantry crane to do this one, and it's a very unique arrangement. The next yard that I looked at was the Norfolk Southern Florida Avenue yard, also in New Orleans. And here's a picture of that. And what really attracted me to it is, one, it's a classic in and out yard, and I use surgeon engineering couplers, and I'm not very good about getting those things aligned properly, and so I'm not really convinced that an intermodal consist that I put together will be able to hold up to a sustained backing movement. So I'm not sure stub-ended is for me, but I may do it anyway for space saving. We'll see. So the Florida Avenue yard is double-ended, which is nice. But what really attracted to me was that track that curves around the yard in the back. Because this is really convenient for making modules, which are going to be understandably narrow. And so I can curve that track around the back of the yard. I can have the yard, the containers, the activity closer to the front of the layout, and I can curve the main line around the back. So here's a detailed shot of the yard, and you can see there's a RTG, rubber-tired gantries in use. There's really wide concrete pads adjacent to the track for the gantries to operate. But you can see there's an empty chassis there showing that that's where they're actually running the trucks as well. In between the tracks, it looks like there's some sort of an asphalt roadway, maybe? I'm not really sure exactly what that is. I may eliminate that on my model. Lastly, here on the Florida Avenue yard is a shot of my measurement of the yard, and it's only 1,600 feet, this straight section of the intermodal yard here. That's pretty modest compared to 3,500 square feet, so that also makes this pretty modelable, even though that comes out to 18 to 19 feet in HO scale, so it's clearly going to have to be selectively compressed. However, it's still manageable. I think you're going to be able to preserve a lot of the character of the yard, because you're only going to have to shrink it down maybe to 60% of what it is. Now this next shot again is a Florida Avenue yard shot, and I wanted to show you the detail that you can get on Google Earth. All these shots are on Google Earth, and you can see the track work leading into the yard. Now the first turnout appears to be a traditional turnout, straight on one side, curved on the other, one curved leg. But the second turnout appears to be a Y turnout, kind of an equilateral turnout, and so that's cool. That was a great little detail to pick up from Google Earth. Now this next shot is a detailed shot of the UP Avondale yard, the stub yard that we looked at earlier, but I wanted to point out a few of the interesting details that you can pick up here. You can see the rubber-tired gantry cranes there. The yard ends at a berm, followed by some oil storage tanks, which would make a really cool scene. You can see the containers are the container chassis rather, are pretty haphazardly scattered around the yard, parked in the dirt, parked on the grass. So it doesn't have to be a super formal, organized. This is kind of a dilapidated yard. If you look at that shed on the left-hand side, it's in pretty bad shape. Again, a kind of neat modeling opportunity if you want to model something that's dilapidated. The last shot here is a shot from the UP Setagast yard in Houston. And that's just a really cool, simple truck checkpoint that would be relatively easy to model, and I certainly might incorporate into my modules. So all of these pictures are, not all, but almost all these pictures are from Google Earth. And so I want to show you how I use Google Earth to obtain these pictures and a trick for measuring things on the ground. Well, Google Earth is really nothing new, but it certainly is convenient for doing research about current day railroading, probably historic railroading to a certain extent as well. Here we're just zooming in on the street address for the UP's Avondale, Louisiana intermodal yard, and I'm going to show you a convenient tool in Google Earth for measuring. So if you because you want to know how big a building is, how big a yard is, etc. So if you click on this little ruler icon at the top of the screen, this is Google Earth Pro. I assume this tool is available in the other, which is free, and I'm sure this tool is available in the other free apps as well. Here I'm going to select path. I'm going to click where the first turnout into the yard essentially begins. I'm going to do a few segments here just to kind of follow the curve of the turnouts as we're entering the yard. And then here I'm going to go all the way to the end of this stub-ended yard, and boom, there you have it, 2,415 feet roughly. Obviously this is pretty rough, but it gives you an idea of exactly how big the yard is, how much you're going to have to compress it. So that's a very useful tool. You can definitely use it for other things. For example, we can look at how big this shed is, this dilapidated shed, and we can see that it is 250 feet roughly long. So that would really help you with your modeling of that structure. Obviously, you could get some basic measurements to scratch build that structure. So, of course, if you've used Google Earth at all, you know that you have the ability to zoom in and get some incredible level of detail. And you can find some very interesting things from a modeler standpoint. For example, here by these rubber tired gantries, you can see there's a really neat complex of sheds, storage tank for some fuel, just a really very model-genic thing with this old container here for storage, a couple of sheds, just a really neat little scene. So you can pick and choose some interesting things when you're looking at scenes that you might want to incorporate into your model. There you have it. You can find yard designs that are modelable for your layout. Stay tuned. This is the first in my series on building my intermodal yard modules. Until next time, this is Bob Johnson with PK&W Railroad signing off. Happy modeling.